We have risen from the ashes to school the masses. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Scholars of Wrestling Show, episode 381. I'm your man behind the microphone, Scholar Jeff. Joining us this week, the first, the original, the OG undisputed scholar himself, the one and only Scholar Tarek. Scholar Tarek, how is your evening going? And did I do your intro right?
The best intro you've done.
Hell
hands
yeah.
down.
I win. I win, you win, we all win. Game over, yeah.
Game over, yeah, indeed. It's been a long week, been a long, tiring week. Now it's time to go in and just talk about this long, tiring week that's happened in the world of professional wrestling. Let's get right on to it.
Oh, yeah. Ain't that the truth? Even in the world of escapism like professional wrestling, there's still no shortage of craziness and nonsense. So let's just dive right into it. In an episode that's more than likely going to be filled to the brim with a little thing we like to call backstage news.
Indeed. Instead of just peeking behind that curtain, we're just right now just opening that curtain, walking right in, and just looking at all the different backstage
News. I feel like we can never get it right without Brian there.
I this one was pretty well.
The flow was good. I can never personally know if I'm the one to kick off the echo or you or whatever. I'm just like, I'm not the echo boy.
That's usually the case with this one, but I'm just like, you know what? There's no hesitant here. I'm just going right into it. Just going right in and just looking at all the backstage news that has been happening this week.
Oh, yeah. Ain't that the truth?
Specifically, two big backstage news that happened this week.
Yes. So if you're watching week by week, you probably know what we're talking about. We are, of course, referring to the sudden departure of Sasha Banks and Naomi from this week's Monday Night Raw. According to the story that went out this week, supposedly, allegedly, Sasha Banks and Naomi had a falling out with Vince McMahon. For whatever reason, they placed their belts on his desk and just walked right out. And just even as Monday Night Raw was going on, they changed the main event on a dime. And needless to say, the WWE have not taken it too well, and in a number of ways that we're going to get to shortly. But before we get to all that, Tarek, I'd like to pitch it over to you for just a moment, because reactions to this have been ridiculously polarizing, far more so than your average breaking news story in the wrestling world. So I'm just going to ask you, when did you originally hear about this, and did you initially find yourself taking a side? What do you make of this?
Well, from when the whole thing went down, it's just obviously when it comes to WWE and when it comes to their independent contractors, it's more just creative differences, and that's the case on this one here. At least as from what we've been hearing about, we've been hearing details from someone who says is the close friend of Naomi on the certain specific creative decisions that they were going for. I believe Hell in the Cell, up to Hell in the Cell, but my initial when I first heard about this, it was Monday, as pretty much everyone else, with the whole story of Sasha and Naomi walking into John Laurinaitis' office, at least in the most peculiar statement by WWE, something that is something very rare that WWE does. Something very rare that WWE does is just basically post a statement immediately afterwards, basically to cover their own tracks of talking of just how unprofessional Sasha Banks and Naomi were with their whole process of where they wanted these two characters to go. And my immediate response to all the pieces that have been coming in is just like, So this is essentially Sasha and Naomi just basically pulling a CM Punk, going, okay, you're setting us up for these matches. How does that, what does that affect us for tomorrow for our tag team championship? And the simple answer is there is, they don't have anything planned forward. They don't have anything planned for their women's tag team championship. And that's where they hit that point. It was like, you know what? Here are the belts. If we're just having them and not using them, we're out. That's essentially what happened. At least that's what the word is, because we still haven't gotten any official word from Sasha Banks and Naomi through about this whole situation. But from what's been going on, what's been said, I kind of am sort of picking a side. I actually am going to be siding with Sasha Banks and Naomi to a fault, or to an extent, because yes, them walking out is unprofessional, but you kind of have to pull the unprofessional thing to really stand your ground on your personal beliefs on what you want to do with your character. And that's, yeah, in the end, I'm just gonna, yeah, I would say I'm proud of what they did, standing up for what they want, because it's their character, it's their characters. They want to do what's best for them, even if it's doing something that will get them in trouble.
I will agree. I am definitely siding with Sasha Banks and Naomi with this. However, it's been very interesting, and I'm sure I would like to get your comments on this too. The wide array of reactions that I've gotten from people who are both backstage, apparently in that locker room, and just from the fan base and across social media. As much as we hear someone who is supporting Sasha and Naomi in this endeavor for all the reasons you just described, I've also been seeing a very vocal contingent as well saying things like, okay, you got to do what the boss says. It goes with the territory. They want to book you like this, then, what the boss says goes, and yada, yada. And to a certain extent, that does make sense. Typically, those are the nature of the terms. However, what gives me pause in this moment is that even just in the past 12 months, these are not the only people who have just left and never came back. We've also lost Jeff Hardy in this way. We also lost Tony Storm in this way. And if you go back further, again, that's when you get into the CM Punks and your Stone Colds and that caliber of talent. But I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you got something different, but I feel like the WWE has never felt like such a leaky ship as it does right now. Even though they're making money hand over fist, you can't ignore that you've got people who are just walking off the job in rapid succession, one after another. I've never seen anything like this. Have you?
Oh, other than Stone Cold and CM Punk, no, not really. Uh, it's more like I'm looking at it as just basically another good example, actually, of just people essentially going off script and just taking their stance on them not being big fan of what WWE is wanting them to do creatively, is the Charlotte Flair Becky Lynch title exchange, where Charlotte basically
Yes.
took it upon herself and just threw the belt at Becky, or was it drop the belt? One of those things. She basically
Yes.
she didn't do what she was supposed to do. And it's actually making me respect these people a lot more, because the one thing that I've always really criticized with WWE is, as you put it, yes, it's what the boss says goes. But I feel like that that frame of mind really only works for the entertainment side of the business. Um, like if you're looking at what I mean is, like, if you're looking at this like a TV show, then yes, it makes perfect sense. Go what the script says and all that. But I feel like the big difference in professional wrestling is that the wrestlers should be just as much the creative as the writers and Vince McMahon. So if there's something that the wrestler's like, oh, this, I don't like where this is going for my character, or is there going at anything going for the character? Ooh, excuse me. Is there anything going on for my character? What's the long game? And it's like, oh, we don't have a long game. This is just what we're doing. We're in the now, and that's WWE's frame of mind going for the past couple of years. Just live in the now. We're not thinking of the long term goals. We're thinking about the moments that we're in right now. And that's just something that's not really working unless you're involved in the bloodline. They don't think about the long run on that. They just think, okay, for the bloodline, we'll think of something in the long run to an extent, because they're just making plans, and who knows what they're gonna, if the plans are actually gonna go through, aka Twain. Uh but back to what I was saying, yeah, I feel like when it comes to basically the creative sides, it's, you really got to add these wrestlers or independent contractors, for in WWE's case, you're that you have to add these people in to help tell these stories. And because WWE has their whole strict of, you got to do what the script says, you have no real creative input unless you're Roman. That's a very toxic working environment that is hitting harder now, with all these people standing up for what they believe in, for what's best for their characters, what's best for them professionally. So again, I will side with them if it, like, to get their message heard through their unprofessionalism. Stand up, make yourself known, saying you're not going to take this shit. And people like Stone Cold and CM Punk really got away with it back in the day because WWE was all that they had. Unless they're just going into like Impact or Ring of Honor or New Japan. Now that you have another big business like AEW, who is like slowly rising in the popularity standards of competition, now you're just thinking, okay, now your work ethic has to change in order to keep your people from people being happy and not having them want to walk out. And and just basically continue to just show their frustrations on their social medias and just all that.
You know, this is actually a very interesting conversation to me, because I think I sort of, I don't want to say I called it, but I called it at the beginning of the year, and at the end of last year. I predicted that this was going to be a war of two very different kinds of schools of thought regarding professional wrestling. Typically, I'd absolutely agree with you. That's having your wrestlers have that creative freedom, having that influence on that, being able to branch out creatively and come up with really engaging and dynamic characters and storylines and portrayals of their own self. I think that's where you get the most enjoyable stuff. However, I think there is also something to be said for, if you give a wrestler too much creative control, you could get something like a Hulk Hogan or an Ultimate Warrior back in the day, where
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing to really temper that. So,
Oh, I agree. Mm-hmm.
what I see with WWE is sort of help mitigate that, can also provide fuel and direction for some people who can really benefit from that. Because let's be real, sometimes when those ideas hit, but when you've got a corporate machine as big as WWE is, with as much money as WWE has, when they hit, they will hit hard. Is it common? Is it as frequent as it should be for a company that large? Unfortunately, in my estimation, no. but there is still something to be said for that. And that's where I feel like the most of the conversation I've seen has been going to, where you've got this versus unbridled creativity mixed with a possibility of just like lawlessness versus structure that can very quickly and easily become stale and rigid. It's been absolutely wild to see.
Oh, it actually is, and, like, it's actually really funny you're bringing that up because I do agree. It's like, yeah, there's WWE standards of too much control over the wrestlers, and then you look at something like what you brought up, like Hulk Hogan, or what the reason why WCW failed is because they were giving the wrestlers too much creative. There's got to be that both sides are like the extremes of the different of the two sides of the coin. Like too much creative wrestler creative control, too much of the creative backstage, the writers, Vince McMahon, too much creative. So there's no company that's really in the middle. I mean, even AEW is actually having that similar aspect of what got WCW in trouble with giving certain wrestlers too much creative freedom. I mean, apparently, with MJF is being unhappy backstage of all the. Apparently, there's just more words going out of just wrestlers being frustrated in AEW. It, in a similar aspect of what WCW had. So even in today's standards, both AEW and WWE are basically the two sides of the same coin type of ordeal of the creative control. They're both companies just have to really, really like what would be best. And I feel like WWE had a bigger advantage of that during like the Attitude Era and maybe to an extent the Ruthless Aggression era, where some wrestlers had the creative control. But now with their much more strict script structure, it's harder to make for WWE to make stars. That's not to make star for with the rest of the roster. That's not Roman Reigns, because Roman Reigns is like the perfect example of having the creative work something and having him work something. They're that perfect blend, really. Now it's just action. Now when it comes to the story, I'm kind of done with the Roman Reigns bloodline stories, but that's a whole different topic of discussion.
One that I'm sure we're going to revisit several times in the future, just as we have in the past.
Especially now after what happened on this tonight's episode of SmackDown.
Oh,
Now there's
absolutely.
just
Case in point, we'll get to that in just a moment.
oh my goodness. Um, mm, you're
But even before all that, since we're talking about the corporate structure and what this means for the talent itself, we also got another very interesting announcement in that vein as well. Something I never expected to see. Earlier on social media, Stephanie McMahon announced that she is stepping away. She's taking a leave of absence from her duties at WWE, supposedly to spend time with her family. And I don't know about you, but immediately I saw the rumor mill go into overdrive, and it didn't take too much long before someone just out and said, "Okay, they're selling." Like, I'm not sure if I would go that far, but like, there's, I even though we're not going to know what's happened backstage for some time. I've got to look at that story immediately following behind the Sasha and Naomi story. I just can't help but think, what in the world is going on backstage at WWE corporate headquarters right now?
it's funny. The discussion of WWE selling. Oh, yep, they're selling. You talking about it is actually the first I've heard of that. I
I'll tell
actually
you what, I've only seen one or two people. Maybe it's just when I ran across like a stray tweet or something like that, but like it didn't take too long before someone brought up the idea of, okay, this is an indication that they're going to downsize the corporate team, I think they did announce that Nick Khan is going to be taking over Stephanie's duties, and they're consolidating all
Oh,
these
that's
different corporate roles, and they're all putting them on Nick Khan's shoulders. They're basically mixing all the roles together. And I think that's what's jumping out to a few people, saying that, okay, because they're downsizing a bit and they're eliminating all these other middle management roles, that this could be another indication that they're planning on putting WWE up for sale in the future.
I it's actually funny you're bringing up the Nick Khan thing. I just look at it more as not necessarily them selling the company, just more just what we had just had Vince McMahon having his true successor be Nick Khan. This is the most least McMahon controlled WWE now, because Stephanie taking the leave of absence, like I'm sure she's more than welcome to come back, like after she spends quality of time with her family. I mean, especially now that Triple H is back working backstage full time now, which is I'm glad that I'm actually happy to hear that he's doing very
Absolutely,
well,
yeah.
at least especially well enough to come back. But I just also look at that as maybe like once Vince McMahon actually like gets out of here and most likely just gives Nick Khan full control, because that's all I'm thinking about. Like this, I saw a meme of Nick Khan rising the of Mortal Kombat ladder. It
Yes,
had
I love
Triple H,
that.
Stephanie, and I'm like, it's hilarious how true that meme actually is, because really Nick Khan is just slowly taking over WWE. All is left really is Vince, because Vince obviously, since most of the big like, no pun intended, authoritarian role it is less has been taken away from Triple H and is now going into Nick Khan. The whole idea of Triple H and Stephanie taking control of the company once Vince is gone, that's more dream now than actual reality. I think Nick Khan has actually reached that point. He is the true successor for WWE. And if anything, if they're going to just have Triple H still work backstage, let him be head creative.
I saw, speaking of memes, I did see a similar meme just a couple days ago, except you replace triple Shawn Michaels on the corporate ladder with Kevin Dunn, and then you get to the big boss himself. Like, if he ever does step into Kevin Dunn territory and just get rid of him, that's one ousting I think the entire wrestling world will actually look forward to for a change.
Hell, drop Nick Khan, drop Kevin Dunn and Bruce Pritchard, and just have Triple H and Shawn Michaels be the head creative, and have what they did, have their NXT crew, at least the on-set crew for the camera cuts and all that. Cut when the day comes when Kevin Dunn is out of WWE, so no more quick cuts and zooming in and out during fights and just leaving me all disoriented. That would be a great day. It's like, oh, good. Now I can actually watch a wrestling match on WWE television and not think, all right, let's see how many quick cuts, 20 quick cuts in like less than 30 seconds. I'll be happy to see that when that actually happens.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeesh.
It's actually really funny because I saw someone liked a comment I made like last year on a video package of WWE stuff, and it's Bret Hart attacking Owen on the set, and I'm just watching it, and I just post, I'm like, there's something about this first clip of Bret Hart attacking that is just really capturing me. Oh wait, I know what it is. Not the 20 quick cuts of Bret Hart beating up Owen in different angles and zooming in. It's nice to actually see what I'm watching. It was like, this makes me just keep reminding me how much I actually don't like Kevin Dunn.
I don't think we're gonna hear anyone who actually does for some time. But before we move
I don't think
on,
that's gonna. I don't think there's gonna be anyone ever for the rest of for the rest of our lives. Everyone will just think, remember that? Remember that period where that's just nothing but nonstop quick cuts and zooming in and out and leaving everything all disoriented? Yeah, what a terrible time.
speaking of what a terrible time, bringing us all back full circle to Sasha Banks and Naomi now for just one more minute.
Mhm.
Of course, naturally, the rumor mill has been just going nonstop since this announcement. Even just we're again as a refresher, we're recording this on Friday night, right after SmackDown has gone off the air. And as the latest as of today is WWE has released another statement saying, "Oh, Sasha Banks and Naomi have let millions of fans down. They've let us down. They've let you down, and we're stripping them of their tag titles. There's going to be a tournament to crown new ones eventually, and and they also announced that they are suspended indefinitely, which I don't know about you, but only tells me one thing. They're not going to fire them because they're scared they're going to go to AEW and they don't want that.
Oh, well, it was obviously they're not. It was obviously they're not going to fire them. It was obviously that all they're going to do is probably just what what they actually did, suspend them indefinitely. And apparently, from what I've been hearing, there's not much time on both their contracts anyway. So just
Yes.
let their contracts just run its course and just not talk about re-signing. I mean, it's even funny because this isn't the first time Sasha Banks actually walked out with a creative of the women's tag team championship.
I remember that one too.
So it's obvious that they want to have to keep them away from AEW. And it's actually funny to think about the whole story of Fox wanting to have Sasha Banks be one of the quote unquote crossover stars into television slash movies, but it's clear as day that WWE doesn't really care about, at least Sasha Banks in that point. They have their crossover stars that they have in mind. And obviously, Sasha Banks isn't one of them. You can tell by that, by them not really promoting the fact that Sasha Banks was on Mandalorian. Maybe just quick, oh yeah, she was on Mandalorian. That happened.
Yeah, she's been on Mandalorian. She's made other appearances for the YouTube channel First We Feast. She was on Hot Ones. There's
And you hear
you,
absolutely
you
nothing about
can't
it.
you can't say that someone like Sasha Banks does not have crossover appeal. I
Oh,
mean,
she definitely does, but just not in WWE's eyes because they have their own select few that have crossover appeal that they're going to basically promote the hell out of. I mean, look what happened when Roman was just a background character for Hobbs and Shaw. They were all over that. You watch Hobbs and Shaw, watch Roman Reigns, watch it, watch Roman Reigns on uh, Hobbs and Shaw with his cousin The Rock, which we want to make a WrestleMania match, even though we're trying to call Rock so many times and he's just not answering back because he has better things to do, like actually making the XFL successful.
and being an actual big movie is like Black Adam. So, ooh, ugh,
So yeah,
oh
WWE
man.
has their own selection of people that they want to have as crossover stars. And the fact that people at Fox want Sasha Banks to be one of those people, and it's clear WWE does not. It just shows, again, the selfishness of WWE. It's like if it's not their people, if it's not what they want, they will make their damnedest to make you, simply put, to bury you.
And you know what's funny? It doesn't even strike me as selfishness. It strikes me as more just short-sightedness. Like I think if you put someone like Sasha anywhere else in the world of wrestling, people would scoop her up right away. Like even
Mm-hmm.
her and Naomi, I was just thinking about this. They've got really cool names. Like you've got Sasha Banks. Her name is Mercedes Vernado. Like that is a cool ass name. And Naomi's is even better. You have a woman named Trinity Fatu, and you're going to call her Naomi? Like, dude, come on. What are you thinking, man?
What's LA Knight's new wrestling name? What do you
Something
think?
even dumber, something that doesn't sound like Eli Drake at all. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go through my statuses on the Twitter machines or something. I'll look it up later. But again, you take really talented people, really engaging personalities, and then you turn them into actors, interchangeable roles where nothing matters. That's great to if they're actors, that's what they do. But when people get engaged with a certain character, the dynamics of wrestling are completely different. And what's even funnier, pardon me if this is sounding a little bit ranty at this point, when I've asked other strict WWE loyalists about this, the most I will get in terms of response is, oh, it's not all that bad. I've gotten used to it. It's really not all that bad. Stop complaining, whatever. Everyone seems to, I've heard from so far, seems to have that kind of neutral or indifferent reaction, but no one is really excited about it. No one's really intrigued by it. It's just, it just seems like feels like such a slow bleed. And I know that's only the tip of the iceberg in terms of really ridiculous creative decisions. And then we wonder why so many people are just choosing to walk off the job, regardless of the paycheck. Just
Be very vocal on their unhappiness with what they. I mean, I'm surprised with the whole uh Tony Storm. It's like, oh yeah, how do you feel about being stripped down? Well, if it
oh
keeps
yeah.
gives me a paycheck, sure.
And you know for a fact that there's going to be more than enough people who are going to take that big ass paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
Where at least with the one person I can say that makes all the sense in the world, Kevin Owens. At least in terms of personal goals and on-screen character, right from the get-go, he was portrayed as a prize fighter. He's going to beat people up to get as much money as he possibly can to take care of his family. That's just consistent. And with the role he's been given, and he gets to main event night one of WrestleMania against Stone Cold Steve Austin. Honestly, if I had the Kevin Owens spot, I might take that check too. But the fact of the
And
matter is, not everyone has those kinds of spots.
and I will say, Kevin Owens is that he's another one of those people who just takes the stuff that he's given and makes it gold. I love this whole Ezekiel is Elias storyline because it's mainly just because of him. He is making this one of the funniest things to watch.
I'll,
Just from seeing what he does and how he's reacting to it and the stuff that he's pulling, I actually love it. I'm having a blast with that.
no
He
one can
knows how
say
to
he's
make.
not trying.
At this point he doesn't need to try. He's just that comic. He's just that uh good of a talent.
Hey, if he's making that kind of money, if he's making big WWE money, and he's happy with where he is, and hey, muscle, great. But the fact of the matter is that like you can't deny the symptoms. A lot of people are just choosing to drop everything and walk away unceremoniously. If it was just Sasha Banks and Naomi, I would just say, okay, maybe some of their detractors are right. Maybe they're being a little bit too diva-esque. Maybe their demands and expectations are unreasonable. Yada yada yada. But this is far from the first time we've seen this. I don't think it's going to be the last before the year's out.
I think this has been the biggest essentially walkout since Bray Wyatt.
Bray wasn't
Of like,
Wyatt wasn't even a walkout. He was released.
I mean, of just someone who is just as another example of just having someone who is this very creative person and just not allowing him to have the creative freedom for
I
his
see.
character.
And
That's
then
what I
just
mean.
cutting them loose, letting them
And
go.
then just cutting him loose. Exactly. I think Bray Wyatt has been their biggest name that they let go since, like, now it's Sasha Banks and Naomi. Beforehand, it was right beforehand, it's Bray Wyatt. So it's a lost opportunity. And I know how it's actually really funny because I heard Brian Alvarez's take on it's like, oh, especially because he was bringing up the spooky character discussion with about Joe Gacy on NXT, and he's like, "Oh, the Bray Wyatt." People are saying Bray Wyatt is was their best chance of being the next Undertaker. It's like, well, if that was the case, if that was the case, he wouldn't be fired. I was like, well, that's just because they have big creative differences. If they allowed him to have the creative freedoms, then he would be the next Undertaker. But it just to the same exact story of what him. He was just the same thing with Keith Lee and Tony Storm. They're just difficult to work with. That's WWE's excuse. They're just too difficult to work with.
Because they're not interchangeable parts. They're not actors, they're wrestlers. Whoopity-doo.
Mm-hmm. So
on that note, I do have one small Scholar's Quick Talk before we move on.
Yeah, go ahead. Because what I was gonna say, I just had a brain fart and I just forgot what I'm like. I was like,
oh, well, if it's important, you'll get back to it in a moment. But in the meantime, I do have a Scholar's Quick Talk for you. If you had to put your money on something now, what do you think WWE is going to do next at this point? Do you think they're going to let their supposedly short contracts run out and let them go? Or do you think there might be a moment of clarity on WWE's end and they think they're going to try and re-sign Sasha Banks and Naomi? What do you think they're going to do?
They're probably going to freeze their contracts.
Hmm.
Not just do their damnedest to keep them and not let them go to some place like AEW where they can flourish.
Then if that's the case, then the question would become the legality of it. Like, how much could they legally do without kicking the I don't know
it's
why I'm blanking on that.
That's essentially why
independent contractor back. Yeah, like, but then again, it turns into, okay, could they and would they actually fight the case, Sasha Banks and Naomi? Because I've got to imagine they've got a little bit more clout than Ali does, I would imagine.
I mean, they're going to try their damnedest to not let them go. I mean, if anything, I could just see them being like, all right, we're just going to freeze your contracts and just wait for you to at least be ready to come back to TV and just let your contract play out. Basically, it's just the question on they're playing chicken, who will give in first? And when it comes to just the league out, I guess it's essentially the same thing with what they did with Ali. There's like, okay, you just want to be released from your contract? No, we're gonna just freeze your contract until you're ready to come back. And Ali was like, well, might as well just let this thing play out and just not re-sign when my contract's up, whenever that is. I feel like they're going to try and do a similar situation because they're going to do their damnedest to not let Sasha and Naomi go. If anything, I could actually see like the whole re-signing question. I see Naomi re-signing just because she's married to Jimmy. I just don't see her going anywhere else. If she actually wants to stay in the wrestling business. I mean, she can probably do something else outside of wrestling. I think she has the capabilities of doing something outside of wrestling, maybe even like a small acting career, modeling, whatever she wants to do. But if it comes to wrestling wise, Sasha will be gone. I feel like Naomi would stay for her husband if she actually wanted to stay. If she wanted to stay in the wrestling business.
That certainly seems plausible. I can't argue against it. But speaking of her husband, there was one other news article that we were sort of alluding to earlier in the show, that they finally did it. The Usos on SmackDown. Actually, surprisingly, we got the big RK Bro match, and the tag team titles are unified in WWE
Unified.
once again. So, and I don't know if this is real or not, but I even saw a render going around, or maybe it's a real belt, I don't know, of a new unified set of tag team titles as sort of a red and blue strap. So
Actually,
I'll
is that
see
what
if
was
I
it on
can figure.
Twitter?
I saw it somewhere on Twitter. I'm not sure where. Could
Right.
just be a
I'm sure
mock-up for all I know. I'll look
it
it up
probably
again and
is.
I'll send it to you. But it does beg the question, in your opinion, do you think this is actually going to go somewhere? Will the tag team titles remain unified going into whatever's happening next for WWE? Or is it just another bloodline storyline and then everything is going to get divided up once again?
Divided up once again, because they as much as like the brand split is now kind of worthless. It's real. Not even kind of. It actually is worthless now to have a brand split, especially with so many of the wrestlers have been released. The roster is so low that a brand split is is just pointless now. But it's more on the side of the networks that want to keep the brand split going. So having these unified champions, it's not, by unified I mean just double champions. They're not going to unify these belts. If they were going to unify these belts, they would have done it already. Especially in like Roman's case of having one world champion. Yeah, they're going to keep the belt separate. It's just a title. Now, like the unified tag team champions. It's just a name. They're not gonna merge these. It's probably just what you said. These pictures of the belts together. It's probably just a fan edit of doing it. I don't think they're actually going to do anything with that. It's just an excuse to have the bloodline show up on both shows because that's their draw. That's their only draw that they're at least trying to push. I mean, shit. What is it like? What is there? Like, there is no tag team division. There is no.
Not much of one anyway. They've got Alpha Academy. They've got RK Bro. They've got the New Day, of course.
And even RK Bro, apparently Riddle and Orton are Roman Reigns' next challengers for the world titles.
Okay.
Apparently it's Riddle, Orton, and McIntyre as Roman's next challengers. And it
but
just
not
makes
Cody, strangely enough.
I don't know. At this point, like I said, I've given up on the bloodline. I like the idea. I like their idea at first and being a well booked team, but this is now just at the point where they're booked too strong to the point where it's like it's not just it's the Roman Reigns show with his cousins. Everyone else is just background characters. It's the same thing that everyone in the wrestling community has been saying. It's now at that point where the wrestlers are the background characters. Roman Reigns is the star. And now he has a contract that's having him limited his appearances. So, yeah, he is Brock Lesnar now. He'll probably he'll be off TV and he'll just take the titles with him. It's just now just go, okay, then what's the point of watching everyone else when it's just same thing we've been asking. What's the point of being invested in these characters when all they're doing is just being built up just to be fed to Roman?
And I think that's where I was just hoping that maybe with all these changes, maybe something has got to give. Maybe this is going to be the thing that shake things up in WWE corporate for a while, and this will change it all and
It's not.
just put everyone on track for the better. but my hope is wearing thin. It really is.
I lost hope a long time ago. Like, it's when it comes to WWE now, it's a job. WWE is a job now, and I don't even watch it. Like, I still keep in touch on what's going on, and I watched all these reviews of it. But when it comes to actually sitting down and watching these shows, no, thank you. I have better things to actually waste my time with. I have something better to invest my minutes on.
On that happy note,
It's not a very happy week. So when you really think about it, it's not really that, like,
the sarcasm is pretty heavy. I wish I still had that sarcasm sign around here somewhere, because oh boy, is there ever a time for it. But long story short, those are our extended thoughts on this week in wrestling and all the big news that applies. Now let's pitch it over to you, our fellow fans. What do you make of this whole Sasha Banks and Naomi situation? Are they going to leave? Are they going to stay with WWE? Who is right? Who's wrong? What does this mean for the future of the wrestling industry? Whatever you think, leave us a note all across the internet, wherever you're listening to us. If you're watching us on YouTube, leave us a comment. If you're listening to our podcast version, follow our social medias. Wherever there's a description, look for our link tree. You've got all of our socials. I have all the ways you can contact us. And hey, if you like the show, buy a little bit of merch, support, send a few bucks our way and support the show. It's always appreciated. But in the meantime, if you want to keep the conversation going, Fool, where can they reach you?
You can reach me finding out that the LA Knight's new name is Max Dupree.
That's it. Oh,
the Avataric.
And you can catch me completely forgetting about it, or at least wanting to, at I'm Robbie Rage. Join the conversation. Join up now, because next week we've got a good one. We've got AEW Double or Nothing right on the horizon. So I'll be back here next week. Yes.
So with this Max Dupree, since like the Maxim male models, apparently that's been building for a while, like off camera with wow, what's his name? Mace and
someone else. I can't remember.
Again,
at least they called it. They kept his name LA Knight. Like this Max Dupree. No,
it's what's his name? The Indian wrestler.
I do not know.
He was teaming with Ali for a bit. Mansoor.
Oh no, they got Mansoor. Oh no.
Yep, he's now a part of that. Like, he's in it. Mace is in it as part of this male models thing. All I can say, hey, at least as long as, I guess, like, to go against what we were just talking about with Sasha Banks and Naomi, it's like, at least it's giving them something to do. It's actually giving, like, it's again bad creative, but don't, like, give them something to do, and as long as it actually, puts them on the right path of actually becoming stars, instead of just being fodder to someone else. This is the reason why Naomi and Sasha Banks walked out. All right, back to closing.
And you know what? On that note, I'm walking out too, because I've had enough of this nonsense too. I'm ready for something way, way better. Call me a fanboy. I don't care, because I'm getting myself ready for AEW Double or Nothing next week. But you probably already knew that, because you know who we are. We are the Scholars of Wrestling, and you have just been schooled. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
See you next week for Double or Nothing.